Well, here in the Midwest in the month of February, it seems like a pretty good time to start thinking kind of warm thoughts. Although this February is not as bad as it typically can be around here, but warm thoughts. And today I would like to turn our attention to the area of America's Gulf Coast. Right around there, the Gulf Coast of places like Mississippi and Alabama and Florida, the Florida Panhandle in particular. And if you've ever been there, you know that those places are generally pretty warm. Did you know from the news, you probably saw this, I think it was just a couple of weeks ago though, it wasn't always so warm there and they had iguanas dropping out of trees. Did you see that on the news? It isn't just iguanas, they actually have certain species of snakes that climb trees down there as well. And they occasionally just drop out of the tree regardless of what the temperature is. And I don't know about the rest of you, but snakes to me are just a real bummer. I was down there one time and had a snake drop out. It almost landed on me, and I ran away screaming and crying uncontrollably. But it was iguanas that were dropping out of trees because of the temperature, but usually it's pretty warm there. And if you know anything at all about the east side of America's Gulf Coast, then you probably have heard of this guy named Jimmy Buffett. How many of you have heard of Jimmy Buffett or listened to him? Okay, yeah, you have. I don't know, just speaking for myself, I'm not really a huge Jimmy Buffett fan. I really wouldn't take it upon myself to buy his CD or go to a concert, but I have listened to a lot of his songs by no real choice of my own. And that's because back before I went to seminary, I worked in a business, and a guy that I used to work with, every single day, one particular summer, when he would come to work, he had a tape player, and this is in the days of cassette tapes. He had a Jimmy Buffett live in concert tape that he played Monday through Friday, every single work week, and oftentimes twice a day. He would play it in the morning, and he would play it in the afternoon. And he did this for about 4 months before, mercifully, he went back to Carbondale, where he was a student at SIU. That song, Cheeseburger in Paradise, I heard approximately 160 times that particular summer. And I was actually happy to see him go back to school and take his Jimmy Buffett tape with him. I mean, he was an all right guy, but you know, you can only handle so much of that. Those days are long past, but the damage has been done to me. But I thought of that again this week when I looked in Matthew chapter 5 and I saw Jesus's call for his people. He said, "You are the salt of the earth." And what should come back to me? Jimmy Buffett, Margaritaville. This is the psychological damage that it did, but there's a point to it. In Margaritaville, one of the recurring lyrics that Jimmy Buffett sings is, and I'm not going to sing all of it, but he says, looking for what? That lost shaker of salt. Now, what on earth could that lost shaker of salt possibly be? I Googled interpretations of it, and not all of them are worth mentioning here, but perhaps one of the most plausible interpretations is that Buffett's song seems to imply that he is looking for goodness in the world. Salt has long been associated with goodness. Midwesterners, chili is one of our basic staples, especially in the wintertime. Salt is a difference maker when you make a pot of chili, isn't it? It makes the difference between chili tasting like it's supposed to taste or tasting like a bag of dried kidney beans. We put salt on our driveways to keep the ice off. The idea behind salt and how you and I use it is that salt does what? It brings goodness and improvement to every situation generally that it's applied to, right? That's what salt does. So in Matthew chapter 5, we just read it a moment ago, when Jesus told his followers, "You are the salt of the earth." What do you think he was getting at? Now, let me say parenthetically, in our present day vernacular, when you refer to someone as the salt of the earth, it's kind of a backhanded compliment. It's akin to what they say down south just before they put somebody down. They say, "Well, bless his heart," you know. That's kind of what it means. To refer to someone as the salt of the earth sometimes is to imply that they are a well-intentioned hillbilly. But that isn't what Jesus is saying here. The context is by being the salt of the earth means that we are that way when we do a million different little tangible acts of goodness in the world and the ethereal kinds of things. By Isaiah talked about that, sharing your food with the hungry, taking backpacks to Palatine High School. It's also by bearing witness to the triune God in the company of all creation. It means living by the Ten Commandments. It means living by the Golden Rule, which you can find in Matthew 7 and Luke 6. Whenever we represent Jesus Christ in a way that brings some sense of goodness into the world, whenever you do that, you're being salt of the earth. And there are a million different ways you can do that. In the song Margaritaville, which I got stuck in my head all week, I'm eager to get it out of there, Jimmy Buffett is searching for that lost shaker of salt because he knows something that you and I know. And he knows what every person above the voting age knows. Namely, that life is actually hard. And that life is actually quite disappointing. You know, remember when your friends signed your yearbook in your senior year of high school? You thought that you were about to embark upon the magic kingdom? Boy, you were in for a real surprise afterwards, weren't you? Life is actually very hard. And it's filled with disappointments. And the lost shaker of salt is the antidote to life's tragedies. And what Jimmy Buffett is, I think he's a realist. And what he's singing about is not looking for something magical that's going to transform this into some sort of Peter Pan Never Never Land. But what he's looking for is some sort of good news about ultimate reality that's going to enable him to endure. That's going to enable him to endure not only life's tragic circumstances, but just the daily grind of things that wear a person down. Unless I'm really misunderstanding Jimmy Buffett, his cry is the same cry that comes from all of humanity. Every person that you see, every single person that you see, including the one that you see in the mirror, is looking for that lost shaker of salt. They are looking for goodness and rightness and beauty and truth and hope. Now, just a little while ago, Sue Leck was up here reminding all of us about thinking about the why of the church. And remember from a couple of weeks ago at the congregational meeting, Kathy Wotel was telling us about the same thing. The why question that comes out of TPERC that was presented to us, first of all, at our cohort gathering. Why the church? Why does the church do what it does? Why would I want to be a part of it? Those are the questions that we should be asking. We can get a clue of the answer if we listen to Jimmy Buffett's song Margaritaville and also compare and contrast that with Matthew chapter 5, where Jesus says, "You are the salt of the earth." Bearers of the good news, shining beacons of hope to a world that has been plunged into despair and darkness. During the week leading up to the Super Bowl, I listened to a few different interviews, and a few of the Kansas City Chiefs players were giving credit to God for the athleticism that they have. And among those was Patrick Mahomes. the Chiefs quarterback. Now, I know a lot of us get tired when we get tired of hearing celebrities use their platform to spout off a lot of things. But they weren't being pompous about it or self-righteous or sanctimonious. They were just young men honestly answering, and they were, in a positive sort of way, were bearing witness to the reality of the living God in their lives. And there was some sense of goodness about that made people sit up and take notice. That's what salt does. That's what it means to be the salt of the earth. It brings good taste where maybe there wasn't a whole lot of good taste before. It takes something that's bland and makes it good. The world that you and I live in is in desperate need of some salt. Not only is there no taste, but there's bad taste everywhere to be found. And this is a big piece of the puzzle in answering why the church exists and why the church does what it does. Jesus says that you and I are to announce the good news to the Jimmy Buffetts of the world. We're to tell the world that Jesus has conquered death and that God is doing something new and bringing in a new age. In Isaiah 61, Jesus said that in his name we bind up the brokenhearted. And this was his mission too, to proclaim liberty to the captives. We are to give people a garland instead of ashes and oil for gladness instead of mourning. The church, you and me, and many others kind of like us, we're supposed to be a salt shaker in the hands of Almighty God. And we are to be a lighthouse to ships out on a dark sea, because we've a story to tell the nations, and it is a true story of redemption and hope. Our own United Church of Christ statement of faith says that God in holy love seeks to save all people from aimlessness and sin. The song Margaritaville is about aimlessness. God seeks to save us from that. And the church is not the standard bearer, but we are the herald of that good news. We are to be the salt. That long-lost shaker of salt really isn't so far away after all. It is to be found in our one holy Catholic, universal, and apostolic church. For you and I are the shakers of that, the church. We are to be the salt of the earth and to bring goodness in many ways to every corner. Amen.